Hey, Steve, how's it going?
Hey, everybody. You know, great to be with you, Mayor. I was going to be saying I'm a few minutes behind, but I'll be right there. For those of you who don't know, Mayor Suarez published his cell phone number in one of the articles and said he wanted to have an open, transparent, easily accessible mayor in a city like Miami. And so I was reading up this, and a couple hours ago, I saw the number and I called it. And I just called it for 5 seconds and hung up because I didn't know we were going to stage this. And he called me back. He didn't know who I was. Had no idea.
And I thought it was the FBI, actually.
Yeah, I do have a 202 phone number. So, Mayor, it's really great to see you. But I guess, in terms of this, in providing, I don't know how many calls a day you get, but I do know that what I experienced with you just happened. Sure. But let me, I know you place technology at a very, very high position in your roster of objectives for the city of Miami. We're here to talk about the story of Miami. We're here to talk a lot about education as well. But I'd be interested in just knowing from you what you think needs to be fixed most during your tenure.
Well, I think we need to bring the city government into sort of the 21st century. But when you talk about accessibility, which is something that I've always said should never be a boundary in today's day between the public and an elected official. So what I've done over the years as a commissioner, and I was a commissioner 8 years before, I had a cell phone number that I gave out very freely, not only publicly, but I put it out on my literature, my campaign literature. It's always been the same number, and it's always remained the same. But what I've done is I've added some technological layers to the response process. One of them is that I code. When someone calls me, I ask them for their first and last name. I'm religious about saving their names in my phone. Why? Because the next time they call me, I want to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, Steve, how's it going?
Excellent.
Right? So I do that. I very, very, very much encourage people to text me rather than call because it's much more efficient. And right now, obviously, aside from this call, it's going to be hard for me to answer the phone as we're getting together. And the third thing is I do have a forwarding feature. And the forwarding feature for moments where I'm busy will be answered by a live person because I detest machines. So there are some definite technological things that I do to stay connected, and that's something that I think our government needs to do going forward.
When Margaret opened up in a very sober way about what had happened at Parkland, what really the trauma in that community, and I know that you tweeted out your sense of concern. I had the privilege at our City Lab conference of interviewing the mayor of Orlando after the Pulse incident. And I guess as a mayor of a large metropolitan district like this, what goes through your mind as something like this unfolds? It may unfold during your tenure.
Well, I think what goes through your mind first and foremost is that I'm a father. So I have a son in a school, and my mother's a teacher. And so you start to think about, can this happen in one of our schools, and what can we do? I think we have to ask ourselves the honest question of what can we do and what should we be doing to make sure it never happens again. But the second piece of it is understanding that I'm on the front lines. I'm sort of in a bunker. And today, after this, literally right after this conversation, I'm going to go and run a 5K in a place where we had a homicide just 24 hours ago. So it's going to end, and it's going to begin, it's going to end where the incident took place. And the reason why I do that is because I want to create awareness to the gun violence that is here every single day. And I was doing that beginning on January 1st, so far in advance of what happened in Parkland. But what happened in Parkland was incredibly tragic and unfortunate. I think one of the benefits, obviously, is you see the advocacy of the students and the parents and understanding how the political process works or doesn't work. But I'm faced with a reality where I have 3 times the amount of gunshot homicides every year in my city, and that's a good year. So 17 times 17 is 34, plus 17 is 44, and 7 is 51. If I had 51 this year, it'd be my homicide rate would be down by over 10%. So that's 3 times the amount of homicides that happen in Parkland, and that's a challenge that I'm also dealing with day in and day out.
You know, one of the ecosystems, we're going to spend a couple hours here with these folks talking about the educational ecosystem that's going on here, really from very young. We have Eduardo Padron, who's, he's sort of famous everywhere, but Eduardo Padron with the community colleges, and to sort of look at what needles can be credibly moved. And I know I shouldn't just put it this way, you're just the mayor, you're not everyone.
That's true.
In the process of being just the mayor, what do you need to happen in the other stakeholders to get a healthier community, provide people a safe way to a good education and a decent life and job?
Well, not only am I just a mayor, but I was just recently elected mayor. So
yeah. It's 100 days, right?
A little more than 100 days. I think what you have to buy in is on a common vision. And I think what's wonderful is that we all get along, we like each other, and we have much more intellectual talent in the educational sphere than many people give us credit for. And so I think the common vision is understanding that as of today, because of technology, we are in a knowledge-based economy. And that is a global competition. Everywhere I go, I just came from Israel. I was actually in Israel when the shooting occurred. And I've traveled around the world. And everybody understands that, number one, we're competing globally for resources. We're competing globally to educate our children. We're competing globally for the jobs of tomorrow. And the second part of it is that we are in an ever-evolving, dangerous world. And having come from Israel, I can tell you that, that's a country that is completely besieged or under siege with people who want to destroy it. Its very fabric of life. And so, you have to contend with those competing forces. On the one hand, a positive force of educating and empowering your children. On the one hand, a tremendous amount of evil that exists in this world that wants to destroy everything that's good about what we stand for.
When you interact with the school system, which I know you're doing, and you've got legislation being discussed at the state, between your city, between your office and the city of mayor, how good a connection do you have to Tallahassee and the Capitol over these education debates that are actually going on right now as we sit here? I know there's some controversial legislation, at least controversial with some. I don't know if it's controversial with you. But where are you in terms of trying to sort of look at the teacher environment, what they're armed and equipped with, both in terms of resources and potentially guns?
Well, I'm not in favor of teachers having guns, personally. I think, I think we live in a world where teachers have a hard enough job as it is, and they don't get paid enough. My mother's a teacher, so I can say that. And so I don't think layering on more responsibility and making them become essentially police officers when the police officers themselves, as we saw in Parkland, didn't probably respond the way that they should have. I don't think that's fair to ask of teachers. I see my role as mayor as a nonpartisan role. And so from my perspective, I try to promote common sense legislation that I think is going to make things better. I think we have to harden our schools significantly. Not only our schools, our government buildings as well. Because right now somebody could unfortunately walk into City Hall with a legal weapon, which until they ban AR-15s, they are legal. And so, and they were illegal.
Could you favor banning AR-15s?
I do. Yeah.
Are you aware of this legislative battle that's going on in the Senate where today they've actually traded off providing some mental health resources, some resources for teachers in exchange for local decisions on arming teachers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not familiar with the nuances of what happened today.
I think they all unfolded about an hour ago.
Yeah, but I do think that unfortunately we live in a partisan world, and I think that sometimes blinds us. What's beautiful about being a mayor is you don't have the luxury of being partisan. It's problem solution, and that's the way I approach everything from a pothole, to any kind of a problem that can affect my citizens. I have to protect them.
I was reading about your profile and about technology, and you're wanting to sort of change the way Miami looks at itself, and you seem to be saying that Miami doesn't have an awareness of what it can be, if I'm getting that right. And I'm interested in how, from a nuts and bolts perspective, your interest in technology ties some of these things together, like education, like what you're trying to do in the city.
And this is not to cast any aspersions on
Go ahead and cast aspersions.
My parents' generation, but, when my father was a mayor in Miami. He was mayor at 36 years old. I'm 40 now. So what we're seeing in Miami is a generational sort of turning of the page, a generational shift. And I think with that comes a different philosophy, a different way of looking at things. And the way I look at it is if we're not really differentiating ourselves and gaining a significant foothold in the knowledge-based economy and being known and recognized as a player in the tech ecosystem, then we're falling behind. And I think that's a big disservice to our kids. I think that's a big disservice to the parents. And so what I see myself as primarily is a brand builder. And telling the story. And I think, like you said, Steve, the story is not being told or hasn't been told very effectively about all the innovators that we have here in Miami, about the fact that the Kauffman Institute has ranked Miami as #1 in startups in the nation. So when you talk about startup nation, Israel being startup nation, and that's true, Miami is also sort of the domestic version of startup nation. And so I see my role as being someone who yells at the top of his lungs as much as I can about this narrative and make sure that that narrative continues to build upon itself.
You know, one of the other things the country is struggling with, and I'm aware that many of us, Margaret, my colleague, and I are from Washington, D.C. We're not from there, but we sit in this policy pool and see a lot of things going on. One of the battles about immigration. If you go to the Kauffman Foundation, of which I'm a fan,
right.
Kauffman says the best startup cities in the country are those with the best immigration, the best welcoming mat for people that are from outside. And it may be easy, and maybe that's a common understanding in Miami, I don't know, but definitely within the state of Florida, you get to a kind of tougher treatment of that. When you go nationally, we're clearly having a debate about us versus them. It used to be us versus the next us.
Right.
And I'm interested in how, if your voice and your experience in the city, you look at immigration and the role of creating that culture here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get it sometimes why it's a complex issue. I mean, my parents were immigrants. My father came when he was 12. My mother came when she was 5. So I'm the product of an immigrant family. And we were very blessed. I mean, my father had an opportunity to be the first Cuban mayor in the history of the city of Miami. I had an opportunity because of his success to be the first Miami-born mayor of the city of Miami in 121 years. So I don't understand a country that was founded on immigration, that was made by immigrants, why we struggle so much with this issue, to be frank with you. I mean, I understand that you want to make sure that our borders are safe and you want to make sure that people who are criminals, don't stay here. But other than that, if, somebody was telling me, our city manager was telling me that Miami is one of the only places in the world where people save all their money to come visit and risk their lives to come to. And so, I mean, I think anybody who has that desire to be an American and to be a Miamian should be allowed to.
Just my final question, I want to go to all of you to interact with your mayor. Many of you are from Miami. He's a cool guy. He does answer his own phone. That was a totally real thing. And I'm interested in the gentrification.
My wife doesn't love it, by the way, all the time.
Because another part of the community and kind of keeping a community wanting to be there, keeping them involved. And, I've been fascinated. We're going to have your superintendent of schools. And when you look at the school system in this area, it is staggeringly huge.
Yeah.
And enormous numbers of those students live in poverty or below the poverty level. And you have an incredible diversity of folks. I mean, Eduardo Padrón School is huge, but it's also what's going on in the Miami-Dade school system is huge. How do you deal with gentrification in which real estate values continue to rise? And for you to succeed and get where you want, have this be a global city, that's going to happen more. Richard Florida has made very evident that places that attract that talent are going to get more expensive. How do you get the equilibrium right between the people who've been here and are building this community and try to sort of move it into healthy directions and not price them out?
I think the first thing is you have to acknowledge there's a problem. And in Miami, like a lot of other big cities, it is absolutely a problem. When you sell a 1-acre parcel on the river for $125 million, the dirt, it's very difficult economically to do affordable housing. So I think you have to be creative, which we've been and which we will continue to be. You have to forge relationships. That's why it's so important to have relationships with your partners. Miami-Dade County has a lot of land in the city of Miami that is very low density land that we can partner with them with already existing programs where we can do a lot of affordable housing, mixed income housing, and extremely low income housing. So certainly partnering up with them, understanding that there's a real issue, and being creative, I think, are the best solutions. But without a doubt, if you are creating a city that's monolithic or that's pushing people out, you're going to suffer a tremendous amount from lack of diversity and I think from lack of inclusion.
Thank you. Let me open up to all of you. We have questions. We've got mics around the room. Don't be shy or I'll call on you. There's a gentleman right there in the plaid shirt, right? Oh, you just touched your glasses. I thought the hand went up there. Yeah, you.
He bid on it. He bid on it.
That's right. You won the auction. Go ahead, just hand it to him.
Going once, going twice.
Hey, man.
How are you?
How are you?
How you guys doing up there?
Good to see you.
All right, I've stalled long enough. So I'm a classroom teacher. I teach at Miami Central Senior High School.
Miami Central?
Yes, sir.
That's interesting. My deputy chief of staff was here. Was Teach for America at Miami Central. Huh.
I'm also Teach for America at Miami
there you
Central
go.
Senior High School.
There we go. Good stuff.
On top of that, I'm also an aspiring. Let's talk later.
All right.
I've got his phone number.
Andres.
Yeah.
You need a replacement. He's going to law school. That's why. So we may need to find a replacement for him.
Right.
Where are you, Andres? Where are you?
We'll get him. So your question.
So my question is, well, actually, introduction part 2. I'm also an aspiring education technology entrepreneur.
Cool.
And I was wondering, you touched on it a little bit already, but if you could expand on, I guess, what you see for your vision in Miami as far as like a hub for technology and specifically education technology and innovation in the next 5, maybe 10 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, look, and I'll be honest with you. The tech industry understands it has a problem. And the problem that the tech industry has is that it hasn't really benefited everyone. And so I think they know, because there are other cities, we're sort of midway in the spectrum. You got cities like San Francisco, where there's open class warfare. So I think, the tech industry, even those that have been talked about in the media, understand that for them to be successful, 2 things have to happen. There has to be an education component to setting up a big corporate headquarters or doing any kind of thought-based technology production. And the second part is they have to find a way to make their education system equitable so that everyone in the city can partake of the success of having a major company here. And so that's part of my vision as well.
Great question. Other question. Valda. I just want to go to Valda because Valda, I went up to her at the reception today and I said, you remind me so much of my 4th grade teacher. And I said, are you a teacher? And she says, yes, and I teach the 4th grade. So, Valda?
Yes, I'm the one, and I did teach 4th grade. My question is similar to the one that was just asked, to make sure that there's equity in the use of technology. There are a lot of communities that don't have internet, and what we do for the families of the low income that need that as well, and need it more.
Yeah.
Great question.
Look, I think the school board has done a magnificent job, what they call bridging the digital divide, which is, children in underserved or underprivileged communities not having some of the tech tools that other kids have. And that is a big differentiator. If children grow up with a ubiquity of these tech tools, it's going to be a lot easier for them to integrate into that world. Those that don't have it have a much greater learning curve. So definitely, in the city, we want to be as closely aligned with the school board, and we do align with them on things such as after-school programs, which we've done together, and a variety of other things to try to introduce the arts, martial arts, dance, and keep kids preoccupied. But I think in terms of technology, we really, it has to be the way, and that's got to be ubiquitous throughout every single school. There has to be a standard, and there has to be coding as a second language. I mean, you got to learn English. Certainly, you should learn another language, but coding should be a language that all children should speak.
And with that, I'm going to thank Mayor Suarez. Thank you so much for your time here. I should also say real quick before you go, and I want to thank you. The Atlantic has been down here several years in a row with our Startup Miami. We were here 2 years ago with City Lab Miami. Now we're here with Schools Miami, and I hope we're here a lot more. And so I hope you'll keep coming back, and we'll come in to check on your progress. I want to see if you're going to get an A or a C
I hope I get
or
an
an
A.
F. But I wish you well.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
My phone. I need that phone.
I'll give you a call.
Thanks, man.